ever walked into a room feeling confident only to suddenly hear a little voice inside saying, "You don't belong here"? Have you ever had a great opportunity then immediately started thinking, what if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? What if everyone discovers I'm not as capable as they think I am? Or perhaps you've noticed something even stranger. You would never speak to another person the way you sometimes speak to yourself. If any of that sounds familiar, stay with me because today's lesson may completely change the relationship you have with the one person you can never get away from: yourself. Welcome back to John Williams' Global Masterclass series. I'm John Williams, and today I'd like to ask you something. Who have you spent the most time talking to during your lifetime? Maybe it's your husband, your wife, your children, your closest friends, your work colleagues. The answer actually might surprise you. It's you. Yeah, every single day from the moment you wake up until the moment you fall asleep, there's a conversation taking place inside your own mind. Most of the time, you don't even notice it. Yet that conversation has the power to determine your confidence, your relationships, your income, your happiness, and ultimately the direction of your life. That's what today's masterclass is all about. In our last masterclass, we explored why so many people quit just before things begin to change. We discovered that fear isn't always a warning sign. Sometimes it's simply the price of growth. But once you've decided to keep moving, another challenge quietly appears: a voice. Sometimes it's loud, sometimes it's almost impossible to notice. A voice that questions you, doubts you, criticizes you, talks you out of opportunities and keeps pulling you back towards what's familiar. Today, we're going to discover where that voice comes from, and more importantly, we're going to learn to stop allowing it to control our future. By the end of today's masterclass, you'll understand why the voice inside your head isn't always telling you the truth. You'll discover how many years of repeated thinking quietly become your inner narrator. And you'll learn how to replace that old conversation with the one that supports the future you're trying to build. Because here's something that I've learned over the years. The quality of your life will never rise much higher than the quality of the conversations you have with yourself. I'd like to share something personal with you. Growing up in Liverpool, school wasn't really easy for me. Like many of you already know, I struggled with dyslexia. I wasn't told you simply learn differently. Instead, it was easy to come away believing perhaps I'm not as clever as everyone else. Now, think about that for a moment. Nobody has to repeat those words forever. Eventually, you begin repeating them yourself. And that's exactly what happened for a period of my life. That became part of my inner conversation, as it were. So why did I feel that way for so long? Because I'd heard it often enough that I accepted it. When I became a professional musician, something interesting happened. People began applauding. They enjoyed the performances. They complimented the music. From the outside, it looked as though confidence came naturally. But they couldn't hear the conversation taking place inside my own head before I walked onto that stage. What if I mess this up? What if tonight's the night I forget or can't read the music right? What if I'm not as good as everyone thinks? Have you ever noticed that? Other people see your performance. They don't hear your private conversation. Later, when I moved into real estate, the same voice appeared again. Different career, different environment, same conversation. Again, it was, maybe you're not cut out for this. Maybe someone else could do this better. Maybe you should play it safe. And then something happened that completely changed my thinking. One of my mentors asked me a question I'll never forget. He said, "John, whose voice are you listening to?" At first, I didn't understand, and I answered, "My own." He smiled and said, "Are you sure?" That question stopped me in my tracks, because when I really listened, I realized many of those thoughts weren't even mine. They were old opinions, old criticisms, old doubts, old labels. Voices from years ago, still echoing inside my own mind. And once I recognized that, everything began to change. Because here's what's fascinated me. If that voice was learned, could it also be changed? The answer changed my life, and it may change yours too. I'd like you to think about something. Imagine you were carrying around a small radio. Every morning you switched it on, and every day it played the same station, the same songs, the same news, the same advertisements, day after day, year after year. Eventually, you probably wouldn't even notice it. It would simply become the soundtrack to your life. Now, here's the interesting question. What if the voice inside your own mind works in exactly the same way? Most of us wake up each morning and the same thoughts begin playing. I'm not ready. Maybe it's I'm too old. I'm too young. What if I fail? People like me don't do things like that. I'll probably mess this up. Have you ever noticed something? Those thoughts don't usually ask for permission. They simply just arrive. And because they've been arriving for years, we stop questioning them. We assume, well, if I'm thinking it, it must be true. But it isn't. Here's something that completely changed the way I looked at my own thinking. Just because you have a thought doesn't make it a fact. If someone walked up to you on the street and said, "You'll never succeed," you'll probably question them. You might even disagree. But when the exact same sentence comes from inside your own mind, most people accept it without a challenge. Why is that? Because it's wearing your voice. And that's what gives it authority. Not truth, it's just familiarity. One of the greatest lessons I ever learned was you don't have to believe every thought you think. Yeah, oh my God, you don't have to believe every thought you think. Some thoughts deserve your attention. Others deserve your inspection. There's a big difference. Every successful person I've ever met has learned to question the thoughts that limit them. Not because they're pretending those thoughts don't exist, but because they've stopped allowing those thoughts to become the final verdict. Think back to when you were a child. If a teacher praised your work, that stayed with you. If somebody embarrassed you in front of the classroom, that also stayed with you. If a parent constantly encouraged you, those words became familiar. But if someone repeatedly criticized you, those words often became familiar as well. Years passed. The people may have disappeared, but the conversations remained. And one day, without even realizing it, you begin speaking those same words to yourself. That's why your inner voice often sounds so convincing. Not because it's always accurate, because it's been rehearsed. I remember something from my years in sales. There were times I'd walk into an important presentation, and before I'd even shaken the client's hand, my mind had already started writing the ending. They're not going to buy. You're not experienced enough. Someone else could do this better. Have you ever noticed how quickly the mind writes the stories? And here's the strange thing. Nothing had even happened yet. The meeting hadn't even started. But in my mind, had already decided how it would end. Isn't it amazing how often we suffer, not because of reality, but because of the stories we tell ourselves about reality? That realization actually changed everything for me because I began asking a different question. Not, is this thought true? But, is this thought helping me become the person I want to be? Now, that's a powerful question because some thoughts may contain a little truth, yet still keep you trapped. Others may challenge you or stretch you. Those are the thoughts worth feeding. Let me give you another picture. Imagine your mind is like a garden. Every thought is a seed. Some seeds grow confidence, some grow courage, some grow possibility. Others grow fear, doubt, resentment, scarcity. Now here's the important part. A garden doesn't care what the heck you plant. It simply grows whatever is watered consistently. Your thinking works exactly the same way. The thoughts you return to, the stories you repeat, the beliefs you rehearse become stronger not because they're true, but because they're practiced. That's why people who constantly say, "Nothing ever works out for me," eventually begin to notice only the things that support that belief. While someone else who says, "There's always another opportunity," starts seeing possibilities that others completely miss. The world hasn't changed. It's just their focus has. So, let me ask you, which one are you? There's another misconception I like to challenge also. People often say, just think positively. I don't believe that's enough. Because if you spent 30 years telling yourself one story, and you're not going to replace it overnight with a happy sentence you don't even believe. Real change isn't about pretending. It's about replacing one truthful thought with a better one. Instead of saying, "I'll never be good enough," ask yourself, what evidence do I actually have for that? Instead of I always fail, try I had setbacks, but I've also learned something every single time. Instead of I can't do this yet. That one word, yet, changes everything because yet leaves the door open. It says, I'm still growing. I'm still learning. I'm not finished. You know, one of the reasons I admire people like Bob Proctor, Jack Canfield, Jim Rohn, T. Harv Eker, and Tony Robbins isn't because they never experienced self-doubt. It's because they learned not to build a home there. They acknowledged the doubt, and then they kept walking. That's an important distinction. You don't have to eliminate the negative voice. You simply have to stop giving it the microphone. Because there's another voice inside you, a quieter voice, a wiser voice, the one that says, keep going. You've overcome challenges before. Learn from this. Try again. You're becoming stronger. The question is, which voice are you rehearsing every day? Because whichever one you feed will eventually become the loudest. So perhaps the goal isn't to silence every negative thought. Perhaps the goal is to become so intentional about the conversation you're having with yourself that the encouraging voice gradually becomes stronger than the critical one. And that's exactly what I'd like to help you begin doing in the next part of today's masterclass. Think about this. I'd like you to pause for just a moment. Think back over the last, say, 24 hours. How many conversations have you had with other people? Perhaps 5, perhaps 10, maybe even more. Now, think about this. How many conversations have you had with yourself? I guess hundreds, maybe even thousands. Most of them are so automatic, you never even notice them. Now, here's the question I'd like you to sit with. If someone followed you around all day and heard every word you said to yourself, would they believe you were your greatest supporter or your greatest critic? Now, that's not a question to make you feel guilty. It's a question to make you curious because the quality of your life will always reflect the quality of the conversations taking place inside your own mind. If your inner voice constantly says, you can't, you'll fail, you're not enough, eventually you'll begin living as those things are true. But imagine what happens when that conversation begins to change. This week, I'd like you to do something a little different. For the next 7 days, become a student of your own thinking. Carry a small notebook or use the Notes app on your phone. Every time you catch yourself saying something discouraging to yourself, write it down. Don't judge it, just notice it. Perhaps you'll write, I'm too old, I'm not experienced enough, people like me never succeed, or I'm always making mistakes. At the end of the day, read those thoughts back to yourself. Now, ask one simple question. Would I ever speak to someone I love like this? If the answer is no, which I think it probably would be, then ask yourself, why is it acceptable for me to speak to myself that way? Here's your second exercise. Take each limiting thought and rewrite it, not with empty positivity, with honest possibility. Instead of, I'll never be successful, write something like, I'm still learning what success requires. Instead of, I'm terrible at this, right? Every expert was once a beginner. And instead of, I'll probably fail, write, maybe I'll probably learn something valuable. Those aren't just different words, they're different directions. Because every thought that you repeat becomes another brick in the house you're building inside your own mind. Make sure you're building a home you actually want to live in. This week's challenge is simple, but it could be life-changing. For the next 7 days, every morning before you look at your phone, before you check your emails, before you switch on the television, spend 5 quiet minutes having a better conversation with yourself. Not pretending life is perfect, not ignoring your challenges, simply reminding yourself of the truth. Tell yourself, I've overcome difficult things before. I can learn, I can grow. I don't have to be perfect to make progress. Today I'll become just a little better than I was yesterday. Then throughout the day, every time you notice that old critical voice, pause, take a breath and ask yourself, is this voice helping me become the person I want to be? If the answer is no, then choose another thought. Remember, you don't control every thought that enters your mind, but you absolutely can decide which one that deserves a place to stay. You know, as I look back over my own life, growing up in Liverpool, playing music from such a young age, moving to America, building a career in business, standing in front of audiences, teaching people from around the world, I've realized something. The biggest battles I've ever fought were very rarely with other people. They were with the conversations inside my own darn head. The voice that whispered, "You're not ready. What if this doesn't work? What do you think you are? Who do you think you are?" Sound familiar? Here's what I've learned. That the voice never completely disappears. Even today, before I record one of these masterclasses or stand in front of an audience, the old voice still occasionally knocks on the door. The difference is I no longer invite her in for a coffee. I acknowledge it, I smile, and then I keep moving forward anyway, because I've learned that courage isn't the absence of doubt. It's refusing to let doubt make your decisions. Perhaps that's one of the greatest lessons life can teach us. You don't become free when the negative voice disappears. You become free when it no longer controls the direction of your life. And that's available to every single one of us starting right now today. If today's masterclass at all resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and finish this sentence for me. Right, from today, I'm going to stop telling myself, it might be, I'm not good enough, I'm too old, it's too late. Whatever it is, write it down. Because there's something incredibly powerful about bringing those hidden conversations into the light. And if you're enjoying the John Williams Global Masterclass series, please subscribe, share this lesson with someone who needs to hear it, because sometimes changing one conversation changes an entire life. In our next masterclass, we're going to tackle something that quietly steals more dreams than almost anything else. It's not fear, it's not failure, it's not lack of ability, but something much more subtle: comparison. Have you ever looked at someone else's success and wondered why your journey seems so much harder? Why someone else's highlight reel suddenly makes you question your own progress? In our next lesson, we'll discover why comparison quietly destroys confidence and how to finally run your own race. Because the moment you stop measuring your life against everyone else's is often the moment your own life actually begins to flourish. I can't wait to share that one with you. One final thought: you'll hear your own voice more than anyone else's for the rest of your life. No one else will spend more time with you. No one else will influence more decisions. No one else will shape your future more consistently. So make sure it's a voice that encourages your growth, a voice that speaks truth, a voice that believes in possibility, a voice that reminds you that setbacks are lessons. That courage grows through action, and that your best days are still ahead of you. Remember, you hear your own voice more than anyone else's. Make sure it's worth listening to. Until next time, I'm John Williams. Thank you for joining me for another edition of the John Williams Global Masterclass series. Keep growing, keep learning, keep speaking to yourself with the same encouragement, the same patience, and the same belief that you'd offer someone you truly love. Because the conversation you have with yourself today will become the life you live tomorrow. This is John Williams reminding you that your vision, your beliefs, and your emotions are shaping your future right now. Choose wisely, live abundantly, keep dreaming big, and I'll see you in the next Masterclass video. Take care.
How are you on working?